Hello, Namaskar. Welcome you to the SAAR analysis. I am Chaman Naik and here's my take. Now, what if the next global recession does not begin in a bank? It begins with something far more fragile. Well, the answer is trust. Well, here's the number that should concern every investor, policymaker, and business leader watching this. Well, according to International Monetary Fund, warns that growing geopolitical fragmentation could erase up to 7 trillion from the global economy. Well, I'm repeating it, 7 trillion. Well, this larger than entire economies of Japan and Germany combined. And G7 summit, an unexpected theme emerged from the world leaders. The world isn't facing off the trade crisis or energy crisis or technological race. The world is facing through a trust crisis. But here was evidence speaks about the United States and China are competing over semiconductor supply chains are being redrawn, critical minerals are becoming strategic assets, while energy security has become a national security issue, and artificial intelligence is creating a new race for technological dominance. Now, what's the result? The result is globalization is no longer driven by efficiency, it is increasingly driven by the security. While the countries are choosing reliance over dependence, economies are much more selective, and economic relationships are increasingly shaped by geopolitics. But at the G7 summit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi argued that growing lack of trust between nations is amplifying these challenges and creating uncertainty across the global economy. Well, now the question arises, why does this matter? Because in this interconnected world, the smartphone in our pocket, the electric vehicle supply chain, the semiconductor industry, the energy market, virtually every major sector is controlled by a global network. Now imagine if trust breaks, cost rise, when supply chain fragment, inflation increase, and when countries viewing this trade through security lens, economic growth slows. This isn't just about a foreign policy issue, it is in the kitchen table issue, and it affects prices, it affects job, it affects investment, and most importantly, it affects our long term economic competitiveness. Now look at the bigger picture. The conversation at the G7 wasn't merely about diplomacy. They focused on critical minerals, they focused on energy security, they focused on maritime routes, they focused on artificial intelligence, and the focus on the stability of Indo-Pacific. But the question arises, why? Because this sector will determine the shape in 21st century. The next era of the global power may not be decided by the tanks or missiles. They may determine who controls data, who controls technology, who controls energy, who controls supply chain, and most importantly, who control these strategic resources. Well, the geopolitical map is being redrawn in the real time, and in every major power from Washington to Beijing to New Delhi, they are positioning itself for that future. Now, here's my take. For decades, globalization was built on a simple assumption that economic dependence would create stability. But today, this assumption is being tested. Well, the world is becoming much more connected, but that arises a dangerous combination, because market can survive volatility and economies can survive inflation, but if trust begins to disappear from the international system, every crisis becomes harder to solve. The defining question is of the decade is whether the world will remain interconnected or not. It is whether the world's major power can still trust each other to keep the system alive. But that's all from today's analysis. I will be back with another episode. Till then, thank you for watching this.